Hey friends, welcome to another edition of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. Big week, this one. We had Dubai, Acapulco, two 500 events. Dubai, obviously, one of the most packed 500, if not the most, of the entire season. We had the obvious champion Medvedev, we had Djokovic, Rublev, a lot of great players playing. Acapulco was a little bit less packed this week, obviously. Nadal choosing to withdraw because of ongoing injury, and also Tsitsipas, from what I've just heard from Bunch, which is kind of bad. It feels like I don't really follow tennis, but I do. It's just sometimes we miss some news here and there because we have lives. Unfortunately, we cannot live off of the podcast right now, but we'll see. Things are going well on our side. Vansh, we're here and we're going to be talking tennis again. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. I mean, this is another jam-packed week. We got five events, but mostly Dubai and Acapulco, where we had some pretty exciting storylines there. Obviously, the re-emergence of Medvedev in such great form as he's been, I think, now in a 14-match win streak. That's three straight tournaments in a row. He's only the fourth player in the last 10 years. Since 2011 to really do that, it was him and Andy Murray and Casper Ruud and Felix last year. And to win three titles in back-to-back weeks, different hard court conditions in all three, and 4-0 versus top 10 players. And obviously, he beat Djokovic in the semifinals. We'll get onto that as well. But just, yeah, an overall pretty exciting week, shaping up really nicely for the Sunshine Double. So I'm excited to get into all of it.
Yeah. So let's start with the obvious. Medvedev, apparently a completely different player now than what he was for a lot of 2022. Um,
Yeah. Actually,
it's
let's talk about
yeah.
that because he obviously we know what happened. He didn't have a great end to 2022. He lost all his matches at the ATP finals. He won a couple of titles, but didn't really perform very well at the big events after the Australian Open. And we can say there's a lot of factors there. Maybe the hernia operation that he had after Miami, where he had to skip pretty much most of the clay season, wasn't allowed to play Wimbledon because of the Russian ban. And then, of course, the memory, just losing that painful, heartbreaking final to Nadal. I mean, that can just set, that's the type of loss that can really set your career back in many ways for several months. And I think that's what actually happened. And I kept thinking, okay, he's going to come back. He's going to win. When he won Los Cabos, I was like, okay, now he's going to do his thing. He's going to, be in the top two or three again. He's going to start winning on hard courts. Didn't really happen. He won Vienna. I thought that was a springboard. Didn't happen. He lost in his next four matches. And then he lost to Djokovic in Adelaide. And okay, that's not a bad loss. But maybe you would have expected him to be a little more competitive since Djokovic was suffering from a hamstring injury, but that's all right. We move on. And then he loses to Korda in the third round of the Australian Open. And we didn't know this then, but we know this more now. I mean, we kind of thought it was maybe a factor then with the wrist. He did take a timeout in that match, I think in the third set at some point, but he didn't really talk much about it afterwards. He was just praising Korda and, talked about, his, it was a close one. And at first, I think we were more worried than he was, honestly, after that loss. And then after that, he just looked like he had a total reset. And now he's just on an absolute roll. The things that stand out to me, I think, I'll ask you in a second, but for me, it's the forehand. He's
Mhm.
really hitting that with a lot more depth. He's really using it as an offensive weapon, and he's getting it through these courts, especially in Dubai, which play pretty quickly. But he is just absolutely firing on that wing. He's running around his backhand and hitting these brutal inside-out forehands and just attacking from the ad court, almost like Andrei Rublev style. But just he has the outrageous defense to go along with it. He's serving unbelievably well. I mean, the greatest returner of the game only broke him once, and that was the only break point that he faced the whole match in that 6-4, 6-4 win. And he just cruised through his opposition. At one point this tournament, he won 21 straight points against Borna Coric in the quarterfinals. It was, and then he just routined his countryman Rublev in the final, who had a pretty good week himself. But and I think Rublev was a defending champion, of course. But now you just look at him and you're just like, he's now like three in the race. He's got all this momentum, but we wonder if it'll actually carry over to the Sunshine Double and the clay season. I think that's the next thing is, does
Yeah.
this really carry over? Or are we kind of going to see the upward and downward thing that we've seen with
Yeah.
Medvedev sort of
I
in
mean,
the past?
it's he hasn't had like his most like convincing results in the Sunshine Double, and he obviously isn't the greatest clay court player. Some would say he probably doesn't isn't even like a top 20 clay court player. He's been good results here and there before, but like some reason he just doesn't really like the surface. I think it's more mental than actual game style. So we can't really say that we expect much from Medvedev. I don't think we should just like write him off like during the clay season, but I think we shouldn't keep our expectations too high, especially because obviously he just won 3 hardcore tournaments. Um, but I do agree. Like obviously, like I think he is hitting very well. Like he's being very aggressive. He's also being very patient. He's like just the classic Medvedev that doesn't look like he's like struggling mentally, like in with doubt. He's not really doubting himself. I think I see
Just
a
looks
lot of that in
confident,
the yeah, exactly.
a lot more
And
confident and assertive in
yeah,
rallies.
yeah. And I see a lot of that in his return as well. Because like his return, like for a lot of last year, I was thinking like maybe he just needs to make some adjustments because he's still like pretty far back. A lot of people are just
Yeah.
taking a lot of advantage of his like coming up to the net, which Djokovic did, and Rublev tried to do. Felix also tried to do this past couple of weeks, and it didn't really work a lot of the times, mostly because the players themselves just didn't necessarily have the same level of confidence that Medvedev is riding on. Um, but also because Medvedev has just been returning ridiculously well. It's just great to see him like from that far back, just making those returns looking so offensive. And so
Yeah.
it's just the classic wall mode that he goes on, and then he goes on to like sometimes find, as you said, like a forehand, like an attacking forehand. Um, Not out of nowhere, but like a very calculated match play that he's doing. So it's really good to see. I think we're can be confidently saying that Medvedev is at his best, not necessarily like game wise, but well, game wise of course, but not only game wise, but also I think mentally as well. I think Medvedev is pretty much back to his old belief that he belongs, and he said it during one of his interviews, or I think that he was really disappointed with himself that he dropped out of the top 10. So that was his goal. And it didn't last like 2 weeks outside of it. So that's pretty good. And I think he's going to be chasing the top 3 now. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
chasing the top 5 first, but I think he has no doubt in his mind that he belongs at least in the top 5. So he won't be chasing just the top 5. He'll be chasing definitely top 3 at this point.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's where he belongs, especially on a hard court. We've seen now like how many titles he's won. I mean, he's won 18 titles. 17 of them have been on hard courts. And he's won pretty much every big title over a 500. He's won 10 of them now. And there's only
Mhm.
18 total. And yeah, I have to wonder at some point, is he just going to start winning every single title above 500 or above, and then just, before he retires? That'd be honestly the most iconic thing, like just winning every single big title or 500 title on a hard court, and then just, sitting back and saying, I've done it once. Because the reason I make that joke is he's won 18 different titles in 18 different cities, and
Yeah.
he's never won a title more than once. Nor has like he's come close to defending in the past. Like obviously, ATP finals, he then made the final the next year. Or like Paris-Bercy, he made the final the next year, didn't like win it. And then he's made 2 Australian Open finals back to back. So he has had like repeat success at some places, but you know, it's just it's one of the coolest stats I think in tennis.
Yeah. Is there anybody
Well,
has come close to winning as many titles, like all in different places?
yeah, no, I mean obviously the big apart from the big four, I mean his is really what stands out. I mean Djokovic doesn't like enter in all of these 500s most of the
Yeah,
time, but like I think in terms of 1000s, I mean he just has Indian Wells and Miami on a hard court that he hasn't won yet, and
that's true.
Australian Open where he was just a few points away,
Hmm.
and then just 4 or 5 other 500s, and some I think 2 of which he hasn't even played, like Beijing, and I think like Basel is the same week as another 500 during the fall, so it's like you kind of have to pick one. But I
Yeah,
like how when he's asked about it, he's like, like if you're going to be back next year, he said that after Doha, he's like, I like to go in different places and cities and experience the vibe, and then see and win in a different place. And that's why he chose to play in Los Cabos after Wimbledon, when I thought he would go to Washington because it made more sense. He was a top player and 500, and instead he just went and he won Los Cabos, and it's like, oh, cool, I won here now. So it's
yeah,
kind of cool, and he's back to his trolling best. Obviously, you saw in the trophy ceremony he threw a little bit of shade at Stefanos Tsitsipas
yeah,
after winning, and which honestly, these kind of things, like it's like kind of petty and harmless, like type like trolling, like in the moment.
yeah. I think it's like
And
a lot of if tennis has a level of trash talk, I think that's it. And I think if it goes like too
yeah,
way too deeper than that, but like I like how it's like the like the backhanded, like not a backhanded compliment, but like in a sense, it's they're just indirectly speaking. He didn't name Tsitsipas. He said like someone said
You
this
have
or
to have
something. Like
understood the reference
it's
to
like
know that.
it's like as if nobody understood that you're talking about Tsitsipas. So yeah. But I think
And
I think it's
Rublev,
funny, and does
Rublev,
create some like level of like rivalry. Like when are they gonna face each other again? Like I think it's gonna be a bit more sparkles in the match. It's always
what I
fun.
like about these two is like they really lean into it. They really lean into
Yeah.
being the villain in this kind of role. Like they obviously don't like each other, and some of their matches recently, like they've been sort of like they've not had much drama, you know. Like the
Hmm.
handshake has been kind of normal, and they've just but like they don't like each other. Like that much is
Yeah.
very obvious,
Yeah.
and it's just, you know, and they don't have to. Like they're so different. They're just so different as characters and
Yeah.
appealing in their own ways, and just you know their fan bases couldn't be any more different. Like they're just everything about them is totally different. The only thing in common is that Tsitsipas is half Russian and Medvedev is like full Russian. That's like the only thing.
Yeah.
And like they're playing at the same time and pretty much, but it's just I I don't know. Like personally, like I think we should have more of that sometimes in tennis. Like it doesn't really cross the line or anything like that. It's just you know friendly little like rivalry
Hmm.
here and there, and it can bring more fans into the
Yeah.
game without being like
Yeah.
too disrespectful. I
Yeah.
think.
And I think that well, I think that not being too disrespectful is key here. But like I feel like we always like the on-court rivalries and whatnot, but like
Yeah.
I think it's always cool like when their rivalry kind of extends a bit after, like when they're like on the in the press conference room, they're just kind of like trading indirect blows at each other. I think it can add to like spicing up like some of the
Yeah.
narratives that we can do like in the sport. And if they're not being disrespectful, they're just I mean they're human beings. They're allowed to not
And
like each
I
other, I
think the
guess.
best part is that we know about Rublev's character as well. I mean, Rublev just took this like you know he didn't take it personally when Tsitsipas made that comment, and Tsitsipas to his credit actually apologized after he
Hmm.
said that. And you know at the time I was like, oh, this is like you know just petty and stuff, but even that was you know it's kind of harmless. He was basically just saying Rublev's a little bit one dimensional. You know, I should have won with the I have more tools than he has and at my disposal, and
Yeah.
you know he won and he was the better player, but he just said you won with the few tools that he had. And
Yeah.
at that point, it seemed like, oh, you know, that's, you know, you just lost a match, you know, 6-3, 6-2 in the last two sets. And so what does it say about you that you lost him? But I don't, you know, I personally, I don't really see it like, you know, even Rublev said that, you know, he didn't take it personal at the time because he knows that he's super emotional and he does things at the moment, you know, on
Yeah.
the spur, like, you know, you've seen his behavior on the court
Yeah.
and he used that as an example. He's very self-aware of that. And so he didn't take it personal. And then he also said that Tsitsipas came up to him directly and apologized
Mm.
as well. So, and at the same time, you know, he didn't understand in the beginning what Medvedev was
Yeah.
referring to Tsitsipas, but then he sort of got it later. You could tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was kind of funny. But it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
And
mean,
if you want to talk about Rublev a little bit, just like in terms of
yeah,
game style, like he's not having like the greatest starts of the season, like that he possibly could have. Like he started better
yeah, a
before.
few more losses early in tournaments, like
Yeah,
lost
but
early to
yeah,
Kokonakis and RBA, and
yeah,
but he has shown some good clutchness. I
yeah,
like that he's moving on from some of his disappointments a bit better.
yeah,
There's three matches he's won this year now, having saved match points. Him and
yeah,
Andy Murray.
yeah.
They're winning
I
these
do like
matches.
that. I do like that. One of the greatest qualities of Rublev is that he's always trying. Like he's never really like letting himself down too much. Like he's always trying to like come back and like win, like just kind of
Yeah,
resetting out of your match. He does have like a little problem of like getting too frustrated, or he just
yeah.
I think
Sometimes
somebody
he can
said
let
it.
it
Yeah,
linger for a bit too long, and then he'll go
yeah,
down
yeah,
from many games. But he's never really out of it because he
yeah,
has, you know, he has weapons on from the baseline that he can hurt you with,
yeah. I think
especially the
yeah.
inside out forehand. And he has these set patterns that I feel
Hmm.
like to put him away is still pretty difficult because he's so
Yeah,
intense and he's
yeah.
so competitive.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes he wants it so much that he can like,
Yeah,
lose a sight of like being patient and being like in the moment, or he
that's
just lets
definitely
the
true.
moment like mood swing him too much. So I feel like there's a little bit of a problem. And I like the way that he was playing against Medvedev in the beginning of the match. I feel like he was doing it right. He was using his forehand like
He was even
to
serving and volleying a few times, and he
yeah,
had some good success with it. But
yeah,
you know, once you lose a couple of points, it's hard to sustain that.
yeah. And
And
I do think that one of the things that Rublev should be trying to do, and he did it and had some success with it, is just trying to be a little bit more brave with his shots. Like sometimes I feel like he goes for too big targets. Like try to like
Yeah.
hit a bit closer to the line. Like a Medvedev,
Medvedev is the master of
yeah,
making you do that.
you're not gonna like beat Medvedev by hitting just like the same like big targets as always. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna come back, and he came back, and there were plenty of like long rallies in this match, and you know who's gonna win those. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the thing is because he uses that reliable pattern with his inside out forehand normally against most matchups, it's going to the righty backhand. It's kind of it's kind of
yeah,
stripping them of power. But against Medvedev, it's like, oh, I can just absorb that. I can just redirect it. I'll
yeah,
hit my cross court backhand deeper than yours, and I'll even, inject pace in my forehand when you're least expecting it, and I'll probably serve you off the court.
yeah,
And Medvedev is also not a guy who like takes Rublev's second serve like on the rise. Like he's happy to like kind of stay back and just absorb the pace.
yeah,
But many players who usually beat Rublev, they beat him by attacking a sort of susceptible second serve, and because
yeah.
it's kind of short, it lands in the middle of the box, and if
Hmm.
he doesn't hit the spot well, he's in trouble because now he's having to defend a
Yeah.
lot before he
I
gets back to the
yeah.
point.
I think that one of the things that Rublev can try to like practice and get it better, improve it, is his backhand slice. I think
Yeah,
I think he had a right idea, like trying to slice a few shots. He's trying to like change the pace a little bit. Like the Medvedev's not a big fan of trying to hit good slices. But his slice is just a little too floaty, like too baseless.
yeah.
Um,
He used to not really have that in his arsenal.
yeah,
So now that's a really good tool to have, especially yeah,
yeah,
especially if you want to beat players like Medvedev or Zverev
yeah,
who are so far back and a little less uncomfortable because what the slice does is it throws in a nice little change up and it forces Medvedev to like create his own pace
yeah,
from like really uncomfortable low position and then he can sort of have another forehand to work with.
yeah, and just kind of
But
can try to
overall,
like
I think if Medvedev is playing his absolute best, I just don't
yeah,
think there's any way possible for Rublev like at all. Like
yeah.
it's just very unlikely. Like
You would have to be like a really good day on the office for Rublev to challenge Medvedev
but
as
but
much as that.
but
But
Rublev had a very good week because he beat well, he got out of that match against Davidovich Fokina. He was down 6-1 in the second set tiebreak, and
yeah,
he lost the first set 6-1. And he didn't just it's not like Fokina made a ton of errors and he just got it. Like Rublev actually, he earned those match points saved. He came
hmm,
up with some brave shots, came to the net in a few
yeah,
times as well. So I think he deserves some credit for that. And he also got his first win over Zverev, who's looking much better, like actually now.
yeah, yeah.
The semis, and that's not been a good matchup for Rublev in the past. He was 0 for 5 coming into that.
Hmm.
And he ended up winning against him in a really close second set tiebreak, and he won the first set 6-3
Yeah,
as well. So
yeah, and
yeah.
he did really well saving a couple set points as well. Like in that second set, I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
he did.
if he had lost it, things could have been different.
Yeah, that could have been trouble, and he loses that second set. So, but yeah, I mean, I think now Medvedev is all eyes on with the Sunshine Double. Honestly, with a
Yeah,
decent draw, he could do better than there in the previous years. I mean, he's a little bit similar to Andy Murray, like we were talking about last
yeah,
week, in the sense that Murray never really found those conditions suitable for his game. He did make one final, and he does tend to do well when it's windy, but with those type of really slow courts, it's going to be a little harder for Medvedev to maybe the hardest hard court event for him to win
yeah,
potentially in his career. But now with Djokovic and Nadal not there, and Alcaraz a bit of a question mark, same with other top players. I think, and because he's in such a good mojo and mode right now, he's like everything is just kind of coming automatic to him. He
yeah.
doesn't really have to think much. It's all just like flowing naturally.
Hmm.
I think this could be the time where he definitely could win a few rounds and put himself in contention.
Yeah,
I like his chances probably better at Miami. The only thing there is that the conditions are very humid, and he's not a player who really likes humidity much. But other than that, as far as he should be able to still get a pretty good purchase out of his serve, and still his ground game is going to be tough for anyone really if he's has the right mindset. So
yeah. You see, like maybe the slow qualities of the court finally like awaken him, like in the sense like I can just kind of defend and just be happy with being in a longer rally and just kind of like wear my opponents down. Like it's gonna have to be down to
I mean,
like
his physicality is so impressive too.
yeah,
Like because
for a 6'6" player as well, the movement.
yeah, and I think he made like zero unforced errors in the final off of his backhand. I know he made only seven unforced errors against Novak Djokovic in the semis,
Yeah,
and that was just ridiculous because even when you thought it could get away from him, like in the semis. Actually, let's talk about the semis a little bit more because um obviously, him and Djokovic, like Djokovic had won the last four meetings and sort of had I don't want to say like total control over that head to head, but he'd been winning the last few encounters. And
I think he won the last three or four.
yeah, he won their last four, and but one of those was like a retirement in Astana after Medvedev retired after the second set. One of those was a dead rubber at the ATP finals, but that was a really close match as well. And Medvedev served for it in the third set, and then Djokovic ended up winning in the third set tiebreak. And then they had the one in Adelaide, and then another one in Paris after the U.S. Open in 2021, which was three sets. But basically, I mean, still a really difficult matchup for Djokovic. I think out of all of his rivals that he has, out of all the young players, he treats Medvedev, like he's a Murray or a Federer or a Nadal. He really sees him as a big threat, um, and he should because you know there's a lot of things. There's a lot of good qualities that he has that I feel like Medvedev can match him in, like shot tolerance, for example, or like depth on the backhand, trading, cross court backhands, the movement. It feels like Djokovic has to use every ounce of his creativity. You saw him go to the drop shot so many times, and you saw him just try to just hit winners and go for broke on like the fourth or fifth shot in the rally. And I think some of that is that because his cardio and his fitness is not like at an optimal peak at this very moment. And I think some of that is just, maybe because his opposition at the Australian Open, like it didn't really force him to get to that level. You know what I mean? Like, I think some of that is that, and just maybe just hangover from like that whole experience the last 1 year, and then finally, winning his 10th major. I mean, winning his Australian Open for the 10th time, and then didn't train much for several days, and then just came back in Dubai, and he was a little rusty in his first match. Got through that against Mahako, played a great match, by the way, and then won his next two rounds. But against Medvedev, you have to be like willing to dig in and grind and prepare to like really suffer. And I don't think Djokovic was really quite ready to do that just yet.
Yeah, no,
because
agree.
I think he's just trying to sort of peak to get himself in great shape to win the French.
Yeah.
And and do that. Like I fully expect. I think all these things that I'm saying, like his cardio, shot tolerance, and his sustainability in these wrong rallies. I think by the time Rome or Madrid comes around,
oh, I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, he's going to be totally fine.
I wonder if he's going to play Monte Carlo.
Yeah, I think he has in the past. He's not had great results there though since 2015, and he's sort of like lost early, like to Davidovich, Fokina, Dan Evans, players like that. But then as the clay season goes on, he just gets continually better every time.
Yeah.
And usually by Rome, he's either winning the title or he's losing to Rafa.
Yeah.
In the final, and same with the French.
It's a question of like scheduling as well at that point, because like the Monte Carlo is not a mandatory Masters, so it's like a good decision. It's like an easy skip, if you will, especially because you still have like two Masters 1000 coming up and a Grand Slam. So like obviously, especially if you're Djokovic, I would say like obviously every player wants to win a Grand Slam, but especially if you're Djokovic, where you're like one of the biggest favorites to win the tournament, probably still always second only to Nadal, and who knows how Nadal is going to be feeling this year at the French. But you don't want to like burn out on three Masters 1000 before like the most important thing comes up. And for Djokovic is the record of the Grand Slams. This is definitely the thing that he's chasing the most right now. So especially after like the ridiculousness of 378 weeks since number one, which is not going to lose actually anytime soon right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have that record for a few more weeks at least. I mean, Alcaraz would have to do absolutely amazing the next Indian Wells in Miami, like potentially do the Sunshine Double to even get it back. And even after that, he has so many points to defend. So, no, I think Djokovic is totally fine. Like losing this semifinal, like there's no concern, none like whatsoever.
Yeah, no,
I think everyone knows that. But it was so important for Medvedev, like because from a Doha and Rotterdam perspective, he beat Felix twice, he beat Sinner, he beat some good players, but this is like the ultimate test. So the fact that he got a win there and then won the finals.
I think for Djokovic, Medvedev is now. I believe that Djokovic did not want to lose this match at all. Like I feel like Djokovic, if he would have won it. Like I feel like he tried really hard to win it.
It was one opening that I felt like he could have grabbed, which was the 10th game of the second set, 30-all. He goes to the backhand drop shot. He didn't follow it into the net.
Yeah,
and I thought that was a mistake because if Medvedev gets there, he has such soft and delicate hands, and he he just redropped him on the next ball,
Yeah.
and Djokovic was kind of stranded at the baseline.
Yeah. I
It
do,
was a
but
very good drop shot, though. Like I
yeah.
have to say, like the drop shot was very good. That was insane speed by Medvedev to cover that much ground
Yeah.
and get to it and have that kind of feel. But
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
wow,
But I think that Djokovic now sees Medvedev as a future problem, like in this year, because um he will definitely be a threat now, come the
he's one.
North American Summer hardcourt. Medvedev
Yeah, I mean,
definitely
this is
sees his biggest opportunity of winning a Grand Slam again in the U.S.
yeah.
Open this year. I feel like
This
he
is this
has
is
his
his
eyes
fifth.
set there.
This is the fifth time he's beaten Djokovic in 14 meetings, right? I mean, there's only a handful of players in tennis history. I think he's the ninth in tennis history to have beaten him at least 5+ times. And like
I
the
think,
others in the list,
yeah, I think they had to have is 7-5 or 6.
no, it's nine. It's 9-5 in favor of Novak. But
Okay.
the yeah, I mean, it was 5-4 after the U.S. Open. I know that, and then four in a row
Mm.
for Novak, and then so that's 9-4, and then now this one. But really, I mean, yeah, to beat him 5 times, all the times when he's number one, that's a cool stat actually. All the times when Novak is number one, Medvedev has won 5 of those 8. He's five
Yeah.
and three when Djokovic is number one, and then 0-6 when Djokovic is not number one. So I guess he has to just
Yeah.
keep hoping that Djokovic stays number one forever,
Yeah.
and then he can keep getting more wins.
Yeah. I
But
think
yeah,
that I saw a stat today, which was saying like I think Medvedev, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic and Murray have beaten Djokovic while Djokovic is number one, and Federer, Murray, and Medvedev have beaten him 5 times, and Nadal has beaten him 10 times.
yeah,
It's a
that
pretty
checks
good
out.
company, honestly. Big Five.
Yeah, and he's like the only guy to beat him in a 500, 1,000, a major, and in the year in finals.
Yeah,
So that's pretty big. I mean, these
yeah,
aren't small tournaments, and he also beat him once on the clay as well in Monte Carlo. So definitely, yeah, this is a difficult matchup. Djokovic always has to be at his very, very, very best. Against most players, he can win with his 80% game, 90% game
yeah,
tops. Not against Medvedev. He has to
yeah.
be in top shape.
And now that we are, just to conclude this, I think it was last week or the week before that we were asking ourselves, do we think that Medvedev can become number one again? Did your answer change,
I,
or you're more inclined to change it?
no, not really. Just because, like, I mean, Djokovic is still the favorite in most places that he goes to, and he's probably still going to be around for the next 2 or 3 years. I feel like there's still a slew of young guys, and Medvedev can be a little bit streaky throughout the whole year. He does have some more ups and downs. He does. There's 2 surfaces in the whole year where he's not nearly as comfortable. That's clay and grass, and so I feel like, yeah, I mean, the clay season is a long one, and even if he just makes quarterfinals, that doesn't really do a whole lot in your ranking when you're that good. So I still feel like top four, yeah, top three, yeah, maybe even number two. But number one, I don't know. I'm just gonna say on record, I'll say probably he won't. I mean, he already had it for 16 weeks. That's still more than a lot of other players. I
Mm-hmm.
would say probably if I were to guess, I'll say he won't get back to number one again
Yeah,
still. And my answer doesn't really change. I
yeah,
don't, I'll stick with that.
yeah. Okay. I'll change to I don't know. Like I said, like I was saying, like I don't think he will, but like
That's a cop
um
out. You have to say yes or no.
oh crap. uh okay, so to use the tennis podcast hashtag head not heart, I think he doesn't go back to number one again. But
Yeah.
I wish he could like finish number one at least once in
It
his
was
career.
unfortunate because when he got to number one, he didn't feel like the best player in the world.
Yeah.
You know,
He
that's the
essentially
other.
got there like in one of the worst ways possible, which was like
Yeah.
not by his own doing, essentially.
No, he got there like when he was playing Acapulco and Djokovic had lost to Vesely and he had made the final, but obviously there was that question mark of like, what if Djokovic had played the Australian Open, and then like there was that, and then also like he just wasn't in good form for
Yeah.
like the rest of the time that he was number one. He didn't really feel like it, but now if he's playing like this and he gets back to number one, like he's just so much better. I feel like when he is chasing than when he's like when
Yeah.
he's like the most talked about, because he can just kind of like, no one was really expecting this run for him, at least for three
Yeah.
weeks in a row. We thought, okay, maybe he could win a title or
Yeah.
pick up it because he's still good enough to do that. But these sustained weeks, he's like now he's done this in 2019. He did it at the end of 2020. He did it in 2021 was a good season, like from start to finish, I would say though.
Yeah.
If he has another season like that, because that's still his peak, I would still say like for a sustained stretch, he won over 80% of his matches in 2021.
Yeah. I
And
would
played
say
well.
that
I would say that's still his best.
yeah. Yeah, I would say that like had not the hernia thing happened to him and had him won the Australian Open, I think it would have been a
Oh,
different story. I
I mean,
think
had he won the Australian Open, I mean, we were looking at like I was thinking he was going to win at least five majors in his career had he won the Australian, and then after the season he had last year, I was like, is he ever going to win one?
yeah.
It's just things change so quickly. But yeah, on a hard court, he's doesn't
Yeah.
matter what hard court, he's always going to be a threat. So
Yeah. So if he gets back to his all-time like hardcore best, like he can like chase a few points here. And I feel like he's still got like
yeah,
good game enough to do well at Wimbledon. I think he can still figure out a way for it to happen. It's
yeah.
hard, but like we'll see.
I mean,
But
definitely Wimbledon, he has a bigger chance than he does on the
yeah,
clay just because of the low bounce, the flat
yeah.
hitting. He still has the big
And
serve
there's
that he
also
can on.
and there's also not a lot of players who are great
Yeah,
grass court players anyway. So like if he can try to find like to be at least better than the rest, so not necessarily great, but good enough.
I
So
guess please let him play Wimbledon. That's the thing. Please let him play Wimbledon so we can find
yeah,
out.
yeah. Let's hope that Wimbledon opens up this time around.
Yeah, and I'm not going to underestimate him on clay either. He's made Monte Carlo semifinal, Barcelona final, Roland Garros quarterfinal. Like he can do damage on the clay. It's just he
He
has to
just
be in the
needs
right
to get over
mindset.
his head on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. And also like he hasn't had a full clay court season since 2019.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think he deserves to have one proper clay season where he plays all the tournaments, and then we can evaluate.
Yeah. Hey guys, a little break from my conversation with Vansh. Owen actually got to send us a little note about what his thoughts are from Medvedev's week in Dubai, the matches that he's played against Djokovic, against Coric, what he thinks from Medvedev, what he expects from him for the rest of the season, how he believes that he's going to play during the clay and grass season to come, and a bit of from the rivalry as well. So yeah, these are a few words from Owen for this podcast. And you better be sure that he will be back recording with us soon. Just you wait a little bit. The time zone's a little bit rough for him now that he's in Australia, but we will still find ways to record. And yeah, Owen is still very much a part of this podcast, so enjoy his insights.
Hey everyone, Owen here. So I think the clearest thing about Medvedev's title run is that his A-game is back, right? He didn't drop a set the entire week. He didn't even get pushed past a 6-4 set. And he played the 1 seed in Djokovic, the 2 seed in Rublev, and the 8th seed in Borna Coric. Still a very solid opponent, who he actually won like 21 straight points against at the end of the match. But I think in a way, that same thing kind of shows that this week didn't teach us a whole lot of new things about Medvedev. Like, his A-game is still here, that's true. But I think what really hampered him in 2022 was the lack of a really strong B-game. My main concern about Medvedev is can he beat opponents who are playing really well? And, that semifinal against Djokovic, which was the key match of the tournament, I don't think Djokovic played that well, really. He was outplayed in the first set, down 2 breaks, got one of them back. And then pretty early in the second set, Djokovic just started teeing off on everything, which you see him do sometimes. And it wasn't a tank, really. But it was clear that Djokovic wasn't willing to hang in the long rallies, so he just blasted forehands. And he had to do that for a while and ended up missing more than he made. And that's really what Medvedev wants you to do. He wants you to punch yourself out, trying to hit the ball past him. And he's just going to defend really well, as he does. He's going to make fewer errors, and he's going to win every time. Except against Korda at the Australian Open, who had a kind of a similar game plan. But I guess that's sort of why I don't want to read too much into this week, because none of Medvedev's opponents played that well. And on the one hand, if Medvedev plays this well, then for most opponents, it's not going to matter how well they play. We know an informed Djokovic can take him out. On a hard court. But that's really the only opponent who is, better than a peak Medvedev. So it's not like this is a huge problem for him, but I guess I would be cautious when saying, Medvedev is back. Because I think one of the things that really distinguished him from other players when he's at his best was sort of his ability to like play well with his worst shots, I think. Something I really remember from his best matches, like he was actually hitting a lot of good forehands and volleys. If you look at the 2020 World Tour Finals match against Team, he was being outplayed, and he had to adjust and ended up coming to net a lot. And, I mean, we think of his volleys as pretty poor usually relative to the rest of the top players, and most of the time they are. But in that final, he volleyed really, really well. And he ended up winning. And in this tournament, like, no one really forced him to adjust. And so that is still a question for me. Like, what is going to happen to Medvedev when he comes up against a peaking opponent who forces him to adjust? The last time it happened was at the Australian Open against Korda, and he lost in straight sets. So I think that question remains. But, I mean, it's a fantastic week for him. Couldn't have gone better. You know, like, I think a win over Djokovic is great, too, because he had lost 4 straight to Djokovic. So I think that sort of restores some competitiveness to that rivalry. It wasn't like Djokovic was beating him easily every time, but, I mean, Medvedev won 4 of their first 9 matches, which, like, against Djokovic, that's incredible. Beat him 3 times on hard court. This is his 4th win against Djokovic on a hard court. So I think it's good to just sort of, I guess, prove to himself again that he can beat that guy. Because Djokovic was on a hell of a run. He had won 20 straight matches. So yeah, going forward, like, I'm optimistic about Medvedev's year. We know he's not great on clay. He's not great on grass. So I wonder if he can almost use that portion of the year to play, like, pressure-free. And just, like, really go for it. Because it's not like anyone is expecting him to win really a single tournament on clay or grass. So if I were him, I'd use that as an opportunity to really, like, go for his shots, maybe play a little low percentage. And then when the hard courts come around again, he can maybe play a little safer, because that is what he does best. So yeah, I'm curious to see how his year turns out. Fantastic week for him. But again, I don't think this necessarily means he's fully back. I think the main question for him is still what's going to happen when he comes up against an opponent playing really well and he's forced to step outside of his comfort zone.
But yeah, shifting over into Acapulco in Mexico. Obviously, we mentioned this earlier, but I know Alcaraz, Cameron Norrie also pulled out. That was expected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Tsitsipas wasn't there, Sinner wasn't there. And
Yeah.
Ruud is, like, you know, coming back still, and he's not in great shape right now. He took a bit of an early loss to Taro Daniel and looked kind of not so great in his first round either. But I'm not too concerned about him, because I think he also had a similar slump like this after the US Open, and then he, you know, did well at the ATP finals, and maybe just a little concerned that you know, that he didn't look anywhere close to his best. But I also think he's maybe paying the price a little bit for the exhibition tour that he went on with Nadal at the end of Latin America tour, and then he didn't really have any off season until like February. So I think if they were to do that again, he probably won't do it. But that was kind of a once in a lifetime thing to do with his idol, and also Nadal, who we don't know how much longer he's going to play. So from that standpoint, I think I can't really fault him too much.
Mm-hmm. Probably made a lot of money on that tour as well.
So can't really complain, right?
Yeah.
And he got to sightsee, got to play like in over 10, 14 days, and probably a good experience. You can tell his friends.
Like just tennis for the fun of it. So never a bad thing. So yeah.
But yeah, and so then all eyes were on Fritz and Runa. And then basically it came down to these semifinals. I mean, also Berrettini injured. That was disappointing. He was losing 6-0 one love. And then he retired, but he obviously these injuries just keep piling up for him. So
yeah. What was the injury this time around? Wrist again?
I honestly am not even sure.
Yeah.
Like he just yeah. It was his knee. It was his calf muscle. It was the calf muscle behind the knee.
Yeah.
He put it out on his Instagram
Yeah.
story. So yeah, that's why they had a rain delay, and then the fans booed him as he left.
That sucks.
Because, which is not really his fault, because I mean he couldn't really play anymore. But that's unfortunate, because with his physique, you know, he is more susceptible, I think, to injuries than
he might end up probably escaping Indian Wells at this point.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe hopefully it was just a minor thing and he can just sort of play through it. But um, the semifinals we got ended up being Tommy Paul against Taylor Fritz, and then Rune versus de Minaur.
Yeah.
And that Acapulco semifinal Friday was just a total show to watch. Like that was just complete entertainment theater, guts, determination, but at the same time, just really appalling scheduling again. Like you're scheduling these matches at 8 in the evening, and then they go 3.5 hours, and then you have a long break, and then by the time Rune and de Minaur, and it was brutal conditions, like super humid, like 90% humidity, like 80, 85 degrees, like both players in the Fritz and Paul match were just totally like collapsing on the court. There was one point where Fritz was like puking in the nearest bin. It was like Sampras style, like 1996 US Open vibes with like Fritz just like puking, like Paul was like cramping, and Fritz, actually Morgan Riddle, Fritz's girlfriend, like put something on her story.
Yeah.
Which basically said, oh, I actually have it right here. She posted the story, on her Instagram, and she was like, after he got sick on court last night, we were up till 4 a.m. with the tournament doctors. He couldn't keep any food down, chills, severe hydration, full body cramping, and almost had to go to the hospital. Ugh. So scary. He is so stubborn to default and pushed himself so hard, and these high humidity tournaments are no joke. It's a really sad way to end the week, but I'm so proud of him for the last few weeks and excited to get to Indian Wells. Obviously, he's the defending champion there, and now he's top 5 in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good context. I didn't get to watch much of Acapulco this week, so I didn't watch this one. I was surprised that Paul ended up beating Fritz. I think Fritz might have been a little bit more fatigued, but yeah, I guess it's good context that he definitely lost to like a player who knows his game. So like Americans know each other, so they know how to play each other. And I guess like this definitely.
And Paul is incredible. Paul is an incredible athlete, mover, and any kind of a sickness or anything like that. I mean,
definitely like
he's going to take advantage.
As Fritz himself said,
he was up 6-3, 5-4, Paul, and he served for the match, and he had match point. And he got a little nervous. He missed an overhead, and then he gets broken back. Fritz takes that set in a tiebreak, and then Fritz goes up 3-1 in the third set. So you're thinking, okay, this is going to be tough, but probably Fritz will end up winning this. He's the favorite to do so at least. And then he just started. The conditions were just so brutal. They got into these physical long rallies, which honestly Paul is very good at making his opponents do because he's one of the quickest guys on tour. He's extremely crafty.
Fritz himself said it on the Netflix documentary. I think it was on the Netflix documentary that Paul is one of the best movers on tour.
No, I mean his speed is like up there with de Minaur, Alcaraz, like Monfils. Like it's that level. He's an insane athlete.
No joke. I was watching a point on Tennis TV Twitter between de Minaur and Tommy Paul, and I had to check it twice because I thought I was 100% sure he was sped up. Just the way that they were moving on court is lightning speed quick.
It's just a joke. And Fritz and Paul is obviously extremely good like this year. He's made Australian Open semis, and so he's been on a roll. But he goes on and wins this match in the tiebreak, and Fritz is just a complete mess, and he was a total mess too. Like he just barely got over the line, but it was a compelling watch because at the same time these two warriors on court were just giving their heart out. But at some point I was like, did we have to draw a line here? Because it's getting so ridiculous. The conditions are sort of taking over the quality of this match. And it's ridiculously late and we have another match to play after this. And in the past, I probably would have praised them so much for their fighting spirit and probably would have over-glorified it. But now after reading Morgan Riddle's post on social media, I'm thinking should we be advocating for this? Is this, is this or should we just say, enough is enough sometimes? You should retire at some point if it's I
feel like there is in
but
terms
but it's tough because obviously all the commentators and everyone that's the first thing is to praise their guts and determination and steel.
Yeah, if you're a commentator and if you're putting this up there, you kind of have a narrative to sell, right? So you're still the advocate for the game. You're there not to tell people you shouldn't be watching this. You should be telling people well, those are gladiators. And to be fair, this is their competitive spirit. This tells something about the fact that they want to win, and that they want it so badly, and they will definitely push themselves to the limit, which is definitely great for sports in general. But like I do agree that there might be something to be done, like in terms of like the humanity aspect of it. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, those are people. So like if Taylor Fritz ends up in the hospital, he's no different than like you and me, right? So he's healthier probably. Like he's definitely like better like cardio conditions, like physique wise, yes, but like he's still a human being. And I feel like if we are advocating for this, I think that um I don't think the onus should fall on the player to be like retiring, like knowing when to retire from a match, even though that is something that they should know for themselves. But I think it's obviously like
Yeah, I mean, it's
tournament
obviously up to the player to
organizing.
see how much they want to push
Yeah,
their limits.
yeah,
But because like he's a guy who has insane determination and self-belief, and he will like push himself over
yeah,
the edge.
yeah,
Remember, he got wheeled off the court at the French Open in 2021.
yeah,
He had a meniscus tear, like something that normally would take like 6-7 weeks to come back from.
yeah.
He comes back in 3 weeks, and he's already in the third round of Wimbledon. And obviously, in the Netflix series, you saw how much he
He wanted to
desperately wanted
play.
to play that final. So
Yeah,
he's definitely one of the guys who just never quits
yeah.
and never gives up.
And
And
it's hard to agree against the decision, right? He won in hindsight. He won Indian Wells. So like, what if he chooses not to play? Like, you
oh,
just
he would
default
have
the
regretted
title
it
to Nadal.
he would have regretted that for the rest of his life, like
Yeah,
he was
like he
himself.
was saying. Yeah. So like, yeah. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, and he definitely like.
But the tournament organizers definitely need to take more things into
I
account.
agree. That's the thing. I feel like humidity, like high humidity, and like taking into consideration players like physiques and like
Yeah.
I feel like it should definitely like enter in like a scale of like you know how it has like high heat, like the heat rule in Australia. I feel like this could be like something that is implemented like tour wise, so that like we know like, well, what are the conditions that are actually like hazardous for players. Sort of
I mean,
like
in the next
the
match,
Roland
right?
Garros match like last year between Zverev and Nadal. That was stupid.
That reminded me a little bit of this. I mean,
Yeah.
not in like an injury in a sense, like what happened in that match, but like just both players were just total sick. Like Paul couldn't even enjoy the win. Like it was the biggest win of his
Yeah.
life. Like essentially making a final of a 500, I guess, after the Australian Open. And like he was just so relieved and just done that it was over. It looked like he was just going to collapse and just
Yeah.
like
At that point, you just kind of go
it
back
was
to
just
the
relief more than
physio
anything
room.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you don't, you probably have like another 4 hours of work that you have to do after the match is over.
Yeah. And
It's
who
like you
knows, like
have,
the Fritz almost ended up in the hospital. Who knows, like if Paul wasn't close to getting into it
oh,
one as
I
well.
imagine he would have had a really hard time recover. Even though he's like I said, like an insane athlete, but even then, like then you had de Minaur and Runa, and it's kind of like three of the four semifinalists cramped, and de Minaur is just like I'm good, I'm thriving here, and
Yeah.
he just kind of won. I'm gonna say it's more than that. I feel like de Minaur has elevated his level quite a bit, like actually in the last 4 months.
Yeah.
Because he's beaten Medvedev now, he's beaten Rafa, and the knock on him always was, oh, he can't beat the top players because he just doesn't have enough firepower from the back of the court. But now I feel like he is really getting the most out of his game
Yeah.
because now he's beaten Medvedev, Nadal, Rublev. In this tournament, he beats Paul, he beats Runa, and Runa in the third set had a full body cramp. Like I'm telling you, he could not move, even a
Hmm.
muscle. He was hitting underhand serves every other point, and
Uh,
he was having to just like crush balls on his forehand, and he still somehow won 2 games. I don't know how he did that. That was insane to even win those 2 games. And he refused to quit and give up. And
yeah. At that point, that's when I think, well, you just can't play. Like if I'm a coach, I'm like, well, if you get to this situation, there's like literally nothing you can do. Just retire. Like you're not gonna do it yourself any better if you're like not even close to winning this match. So
Bruno was so good, like in the first set and a half, and he was just dominating rallies. And he was just a better player, like you would expect, ranking wise
yeah,
and pedigree wise as well. And then like it just Diminor just made it so physical. Like that's what Diminor just
yeah,
does so well. He has this way of just like sucking you in his game and just making you like suffocate because he's just
yeah,
so quick and he's so relentless and I feel like he's subtle about the way he goes about it because he actually has some decent variety too. He can come forward, he can serve and volley, and he has to sort of make up for his lack of baseline firepower. So he has to
yeah,
like take off super early on the rise, like on the half bounce. He has to like
yeah,
come in on like play aggressive on certain occasions. But I mean, obviously there's a ceiling, but it's great to see him like sort of maximize it. He has 7 titles now, and this is his biggest one.
yeah.
It's quite a lot of titles. He does definitely
I mean,
Not been
the fact that
high
he's
rank 18. 18 is his career high ranking, and now he's back to that.
yeah, I
So,
think
and he's
that
kind of been the same player for the
yeah,
last 4 or 5 years, but now he's really starting to get the
yeah.
most.
I think that one thing about Deminor is that, like, as you said, like he's not going to. There's a ceiling to his game. So in a sense, he's like an equivalent of like Rublev in the sense that like Rublev is a power player. He attacks like a lot, and he wins essentially everywhere where he's supposed to. And I guess Deminor in the sense this is like the lower ranked version of Rublev in that
Yeah,
sense, except like
he's
he's
like the
not attacking. Yeah, he's a
round three,
defensive
round four
player.
version. He's like a litmus test of like, can you be a consistent top 20
Yeah,
player?
and
Like globally.
and the reason for that is that like Deminor is a match player. Is I guess you could say he's like a big match player, but like because he's won like a lot of those finals, he's won that many titles. He doesn't know how to quit, and he's always believing that he can do damage, he can win matches. Um, Even with like his obvious ceiling and whatnot. But like I think that's something that we see from the outside. We think it's obvious, but like when you're on the ground, maybe he thinks that or he
He's kind of
strategizes in a way that he can compensate for those things. The one thing that I probably would suggest to him, and I think it is probably one of the things that is most fixable because you have most control out of it, is I think he can spot serve a lot better than he does. So
yeah.
um,
He tries to do
yeah,
a decent job of it and then come forward, and he hits the wide one on the deuce pretty good, and sometimes he'll throw in it on the outside too. The issue is he's not super tall. I think he's 6 feet, but that's a little generous. If you like, I looked it up on the website. It
yeah,
says
he's
6 feet.
183. So
Yeah,
he's actually listed
he's
as
not a super bulky
yeah.
guy either,
Because
so he has to rely on.
it's because when you think inches, there's a little bit more to it. So like
Yeah,
Tommy Paul and Deminor are both 6 foot tall, but Deminor is actually shorter. He's like 2 full centimeters shorter.
yeah,
So yeah, and I guess if you're looking for a tennis player, like a good height would be like between 6'4" and 6'6". I think it's the
yeah. I mean,
ideal.
that's certainly where the game is headed now. But like, going back to him, like I feel like he also does well in this sort of Latin American, Spanish, or Hispanic atmosphere because like his best result before in the 500 was also Barcelona, and he really pushed Alcaraz in that match. Alcaraz had this insane shot on match point down last year in Barcelona, and I think his dad or his mom is Uruguayan, his and then his other parent is Spanish, and he definitely trained in Spain for a long time, and he's really fluent in Spanish. And I think he got a lot of crowd support as well in Acapulco.
Mm.
So that definitely helped him, like in terms of good vibes, good atmosphere, and he was able to translate that into his tennis. And he's just the last man standing, literally, because even in the final, it was very similar to the Runa match. Paul was the better player for the first set and a half, and then but Timonor just refused to give up and refused to go away, and he
Mm-hmm.
played such a good third set. I mean, he was not missing, and when he's in that kind of mode, and you're trying to go through him from the baseline, and you can't finish the
Yeah.
rally in under 9 shots, you're kind of toast because he'll last longer than you. He'll run faster than you.
Yeah.
He'll hit with more depth than you. If you leave anything short, he's going to pounce on it.
Yeah, and he's really good at counter punching. So like he
Yeah,
hits
very
some
good
like
counter
really
puncher.
good backhands, especially.
He's up there with the Andy Murray's and Timonors in just pure counter punching. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they have more weaponry to their games, but yeah. So he maximized. He took advantage of a good opportunity, and now he has a 500.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then you also had the event in Santiago where Nicolas Jarry
Cinderella
continued his
story for
greats.
Nicolas Jarry.
Yeah, I mean, Jarry has played very well in this Golden Swing because last week he also pushed Alcaraz in Rio in the
Yeah.
semis,
Yeah.
and he was winning very decisively up until that point. And this week he was almost 2 points away from losing in this final because he lost the first set in a tie break, and then his final opponent Thomas Echeverry. It's this Argentinian enclave who's been doing really well in challengers and 250s, and he has a big game himself.
He did pretty well in the Golden Swing this year. So he was coming up like every other tournament, like he was pushing everyone like really far.
And
I think he
Jarry,
almost didn't he almost beat Cam Norrie, I think.
Echeverry, I know he took the first set.
Yeah.
And then didn't come through, but it was a good fight. And his game reminds me a little bit of Leonardo Mayer, who was a fellow Argentine.
Yeah, with a two-handed backhand.
Yeah, basically, because he has a big serve and then his point construction is pretty similar. It's mostly based on his forehand and his footwork. And he likes to, I think maybe Meyer was a little more comfortable moving forward. He could use the slice. He had a one-hander. So he was good on the backhand volley too. But Echeverria is just, he's very potent from the baseline. There were some, our good friend Jethro at one point was comparing him to Del Potro with just how big his
Mm,
forehand is
yeah.
and looks and feels on the court. It's super imposing. And he seems to be improving a lot. And he's, I think, in the top 70 now in the rankings. And Yari is a good comeback story because, as we know, he was banned for a while for a substance, which, by the way, he didn't actually abuse. Like it was a mistake, and he got his ban cut short. So it's good to see him have like some more success because he was definitely a factor in 2019 and 2020. I remember he beat Zverev, and he and Zverev had another really close final in Geneva, which he almost won. And then he was pushing some top players, and he got as high as like 37 in the world, but now he's doing really well.
Yeah.
And
According
actually,
and
Schwartzman, who was on a bit of a slump, really pushed him in this
yeah,
tournament. So
yeah.
that
Like I think, at this point you're now talking about Jari, right?
yeah,
Nicolas Jari. Yeah. So,
yeah, Yari, because
yeah,
he's once he survived that Schwartzman scare,
yeah.
I think that really kind of
That
loosened
was
him
an
up.
interesting match too, because like the thing about Jari in this entire tournament is that he really wanted to win because he's from Chile, he's from Santiago, and
Yeah, he's a hometown hero.
the vibes are great. The atmosphere is insane. Sometimes there were like some like maybe disrespectful times where they were like chanting between first and second serve, like crowd annoyances that sometimes happen when there's like a hometown player in it. But the Schwartzman match was a really good one for Schwartzman. I think he should be proud of the way he fought. It kind of was unfortunate that he played against like a Chilean in front of their home crowd. But yeah, I like the way that Schwartzman played. A few points, he didn't always play great. Sometimes he was just lacking confidence, which is obvious. But for the shots are still pretty much there. I find like he still got like some good backhands, ran a lot, like hit good forehands as well. The serve, there's not much you can do about it, but like he was defending well, so
Yeah,
that was great. But Jari,
yeah.
I think,
Some of that
yeah,
ground stroke
yeah,
potency looked to be a bit sharper from the weeks before, and he seemed to really get in and play physical long rallies, and that's what Schwartzman is so good at. And for Yari to withstand that test, and
yeah,
then came back from a set down against Yannick Hanfmann, was down 6-1, 2-1 against at a break against Jaume Munar, who's a pretty good clay court player himself.
mm,
And then against Echeverry, he was 2 points from defeat. So Nicolas Yari really had to earn all of these wins and come back from a set down like basically 4 matches in a row. So
yeah,
that's a pretty good story, and I think he's going to be a big factor for the European clay courts as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he got himself seeded
yeah.
potentially
It's a
by the French
yeah.
Open.
And to be fair, and honestly, he's got a pretty good translatable game. Like he's got a really big serve. He's got a good forehand. He moves well, like in the
He
going to
moves
the
pretty well for his height,
yeah.
like very well actually.
And he's also really good at the net. So like
Yeah,
he threw in like a couple of serving volleys here and there. Um, he's not necessarily like the biggest mover. Obviously, he doesn't have like a super high rally tolerance. If he goes like too long, like he kind of don't like distant chances way too much. But he has a really good game. Like he's very complete. Like for
yeah.
yeah. So
And the
I
serve
can
does a
see
lot
him
of
doing well
damage,
this
and that
year.
definitely will translate on other surfaces
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So yeah, I think we might be able to see more of him like this year. Like I think if he keeps going like the momentum, I think is definitely
Yeah, he's that same generation's like Kyrgios and Nori, like 95. So
yeah, yeah,
definitely still has a lot more to get out of his career.
yeah. So we'll just hope for more of him then, because always good to have competitive tennis, especially in the early rounds. Sometimes I think it's good to have like a good test, especially for the top players. So we'll see. And on the women's side, we had I think it was two tournaments, right? This week we had Austin and Monterrey.
Yep. And in Austin, we had a first time champion, and well, actually, both the players in the final, that was their first WTA final. Varvara Gracheva of Russia and Marta Kostyuk, who we've actually talked about for a while. I remember on this podcast, I predicted her to have a breakthrough year in 2021. It didn't really work out that well for me. She got to the fourth round of the French and had some feel good results here and there. And last year was an insanely tough year, obviously, with everything going on in Ukraine. She's been so vocal about it on social media, and can't really blame her because her country is going through a lot. But she had to go through and win the title. This week, she's now up to 40 in the world, and it seems like she's here to stay for several more years. She's only 20, which is really surprising because she's been around for so long, but she was 15 when she made the third round of the Australian Open in 2018. So that's when I first watched her play. And then I sort of seen her develop, and she has a great backhand. She can serve decently well. She hits her spots nicely. She can take balls early. She can sometimes redirect it similarly to Bencic, which is obviously a great tool to have. And she's not really scared of any opponent, and it shows on the court when she's up against the top players. She usually always pushes them. I remember she pushed some players pretty hard in the Middle East and didn't really come out with a win. Who was it that she played in the Middle East and it was like 3 hours and 30 minutes, something crazy?
I'd have to check.
Like,
I'm not sure, but
yeah, she played. Who was it? I'm trying to remember now. I think it might have been. I think it was Bencic. Yeah, it was Bencic. Bencic was coming off of that run.
She
was
lost
like 3
that
hours
match
and
6-7, 7-6, 6-4.
Yeah. I remember waking up to that and being like, "Wow, that was quite a tussle." 3.5 hours.
That was in Dubai.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, that's interesting because she played Bencic 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I remember the Abu Dhabi one. She lost in 2 tight sets, and then that was it. They always have some close matches, her and Bencic.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to Kostyuk, like this could set her up really well for the whole year, I think, because she also beat Danielle Collins. That was the big win in the semis in straight sets. Collins is still kind of searching for her form after last year, and she hasn't been playing so well, but she beat her in straights. And I think that was the biggest takeaway because I go through this draw, her first 3 rounds, and I'm like, I kind of expect you to beat these players. And she did, like, pretty comfortably. Madison Bringle was a bit of a challenge. She dropped 1 set. But I think when she was playing Collins, I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity for any of these 4 players left. But mainly Collins. Well, Collins will probably be a little bit disappointed. She didn't play that well in this match. Like, just made a lot of unforced errors and didn't really rise to the occasion. But, let Kostyuk get away with 7 double faults. It just wasn't great from Danielle. But nonetheless, Kostyuk won and got to the final. And then, obviously, the big story afterwards was her not shaking hands with the Russian opponent.
Handshake.
That was kind of expected because she didn't really do that with Azarenka when they played at the US Open. And it was more just a racket tap. But I think it's understandable with everything happening in Ukraine. It was agreed on before the match even started. So, yeah, I guess look out for her. She's gonna have some big moments this year, maybe.
I was wondering what was going to happen for the handshake on this one. Like when I saw it's kind of like nothing really happened. I think the
camera didn't even like cut to it. Like I watched the match point and didn't really like show it. It was just like on the side. Then the commentator was like, and as we expected, no handshake,
Yeah. Because Gracheva just walked straight to her bench.
Yeah. And it was kind of like a nod. Like she just nodded and was like, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's kind of good that just nothing really not much happened on this one. Just kind of went by and that was it. That's okay. That's so I think it's better. Like honestly, like even if they didn't agree to anything, something was going to happen given how Kostyuk has been talking about the whole thing this entire time. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the more loaded event, especially on the WTA, was the one in Monterrey, which always has pretty decent fields for a WTA 250. And this time it was headlined by mainly Carolina Garcia. She was the number 1 seed. And second seed was Siniakova, but she lost pretty early. And in this one, Garcia was kind of bringing her aggressive tennis like we know, first strike, a lot of power, big serving, and then returning, near the service line like she likes to do and take balls early and charge forward. Well, that good success that we saw from her last year, the WTA final, Cincinnati, etc. all that kind of translated over, and then she got to the final rather easily. Vekic, on the other hand, the number 3 seed, who the reason I bring up Vekic, she's coached by Pam Shriver, first of all. So Pam Shriver is a friend of the spot, by the way. So shout out to her and congratulations to her and Vekic. You're doing phenomenal work. Keep it up. Vekic has been on an absolute run since San Diego. She got to the finals of the San Diego Open last year, which was a loaded 500. She beat so many top players in that tournament, and then pushed Swiatek, took a set off of her in the final. Ultimately ended up losing that match, but that set her up really nicely. She made an Australian Open quarterfinal. Her losses this year: Sakari playing super well, and Linz and Sabalenka at the Australian Open. Besides that, she's beaten everyone else that she's played. And so for Vekic to win this final against Garcia, 6-4, 3-6, 7-5 was pretty impressive because, I was only able to catch the last bit of this set because I was out for a bit. But from what I watched, I mean, Vekic just held her composure really nicely. She was hitting her forehand on the run beautifully. She has a really nice backhand drop shot that can do some damage because she hits really hard from the baseline, has a good amount of power. But when she's controlling it and she has a good finesse as well, that makes her a nightmare to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can clearly tell like she's definitely revamped her game, and she's having a resurgence because in 2019 she got to the US Open quarterfinal and she was top 20 in the world, and now she's heading back there. She's going to be 23 in the world after this, and yeah, I think, and I have to say the Pam Shriver thing really seems to work. Like they really seem to connect very well on a personal level, on a tennis level, on a just a tactic level, and it seems like she's just committed.
Yeah, I saw Vekic playing against Sakari, I think in Linz a couple of weeks back, and I'm not entirely sure. I think it ended in 2 sets, but it could have been. It could have been in the third set.
It was 6-3, 7-6, but that tiebreak was insane. It might have been like 10-8 or 11-9.
And to be fair, for a lot of the second set, like Vekic was looking like the better player. Like, she just hit the forehand a lot better. Like she was just being very dominant, like from the back of the court.
I mean, in San Diego, she has. If you look at some of her head-to-heads, she has a good record against some of these current proper players. That's why it makes sense for me that she's in this picture, because she's in that same age group as like your Pegula, Mukova, Collins, Brady. Like she's just as good as those people are, because in San Diego she beat Sakari, she beat Puskova, she beat Sabalenka, she beat Collins, and then she lost in 3 sets to Swiatek. Like she can beat most of these players. She beat Samsonova in the second round of the Australian Open this year, 6-3, 6-0.
Yeah, I mean, there's like when the game is good, like it's only a matter of the head being in place, and obviously her ranking is going to rise, and there's absolutely no surprises there. Like the way that she's playing, the way she can play, it's definitely something that I looked at this result, and obviously like I was backing Garcia to win this match, but like seeing that Vekic did it, I'm not surprised. I think it's definitely like something that and it was a tough battle. So it only speaks to the fact that like those two players are playing really good tennis, and Vekic being a lot more consistent now as well. So
yeah, she's put it together now since San Diego. 19 of her last 23 matches she's won. Yeah. So that's a sustained, consistent stretch. So I think she's gonna have she should be a factor honestly everywhere, because when you're confident and you're on a run like this, she can definitely carry this over to Indian Wells in Miami. We'll see. So yeah, I think that covers all the pretty much WTA and ATP events. We have a lot of other challenger results happening. Kovacevic, he's got a wild card into the Indian Wells, and he just won another title. He's a good player to watch. Nice one-handed backhand.
Yeah, and apparently the longest ever challenger final has been played between Hugo Humbert and
Luca Van Asch.
Yeah, 2 Frenchmen, 3 hours and 56 minutes,
something like that. Yeah, this is all courtesy of Damien Cust on Twitter. If you ever want to follow challengers or do any keep up with that news, just follow Damien Cust. He is so good about updating, and just like his knowledge of all these players coming up all the way from the juniors. He's like the best. So follow him.
Yeah. Also, the Challenger TV is free, so there's no excuse not to be watching this when there's
and catch good highlights, because on YouTube, unlike the other matches, they actually put up really decent, high quality 10-15 minute highlights that don't go, and they stay there for days. So check those out, because some of this tennis is good. Like this Luka Van Ash Humbert match, it was pretty high quality, and 2 match points were saved, and it just looks like it was some good stuff. It was played indoors, so yeah. But I got to go and play tennis actually, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Cool.
But
I hope this conversation pumped you up to tennis. So I hope you go and rip some forehands.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not gonna be in Daniil Medvedev mode. I'll be missing a ton, but
all right. Anyway, thanks for the time. Thanks for talking to Enes as always. This was great, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.